So, hi everyone, welcome back to Inside the Ropes. I've now been christened Gassidy. I was going to say Gary Cassidy, and I'm joined by Mandrews, former NXT UK Tag Team Champion, one of the first ever Welsh champions in WWE. And I'm not going to mention what else because we're going to get into that pretty quickly. But obviously, all good things. How's it going today, Mark?
All good, thanks, buddy. Yeah, real good. I haven't seen you in a while. It was it was a year or so back, I think, last time we had a chat, wasn't it?
Yeah, almost exactly a year ago, and you read my mind because that's where I'm going to start. A year ago, the last time I interviewed you, it wasn't really in a wrestling context. It was more about music and obviously a bit of wrestling as well because they seem to go hand in hand whenever you come into the conversation. But as if you weren't busy enough where, wrestling, music, you've now got a podcast. And I feel like we need to add a wee prerequisite because almost every wrestler has a podcast nowadays. You're the only wrestler that's got a podcast on BBC Sounds. That's a pretty big deal. I mean, I think that shoots you pretty far to the top of the list. It's called My Love Letter to Pro Wrestling, which we're going to talk about as well. But the first thing I need to ask, how did that come about? Is it something that you pitched to, WWE, to BBC? How did it all get started?
So, funnily enough, we've been making this podcast now for almost 2 years. So it was back in 2019 that my now close friend Dan Potts, who is a producer for the BBC and a huge wrestling fan, and he'd come to a load of shows in the Cardiff area, like the Attack Pro shows and stuff. And he reached out to me and spoke to me about potentially pitching this idea to the higher ups at BBC about doing a podcast about why everyone loves wrestling, but using my career kind of as the timeline throughout it. So we pitched it all the way back then and obviously got the whole clear, and originally we were meant to, I guess, release it maybe a year or a year and a half ago even. We meant to go out to Mania just as COVID had started. We meant to go out there and do the last episode like kind of from Mania. But obviously COVID happened and the world shut down and we weren't able to do it. So we have had a few bumps in the road since it started. But in a way, I'm kind of glad that we could take the time to interview more people, kind of restructure the whole thing. And I think now I've been waiting 2 years for this thing to come out. And I'm so glad, I'm really proud of it now coming out. And so many people seem to be enjoying it. And yeah, it's just been a really, really fun little project to do. We put loads of time into it, loads of time and energy. And as you said, like everybody in wrestling has a podcast. And I think wrestling fans tend to be used to that structure of a conversation for an hour, and that's the podcast. But when you listen to podcasts outside of the wrestling bubble, they're edited, they're chopped, they're produced quite well. And that's the part that I guess I'm most proud of with this, is that Dan, the producer, has absolutely smashed it in terms of the structure and the editing. And yeah, I like to think that it's a more digestible podcast. It's not just an insider one-on-one conversation.
Yeah, for sure. That's the thing that at first hit me when I started listening. Episode 1, you're hit with like lots of voices that you immediately recognize for a start, and then that breaks up the conversation. So we're going to get into a wee bit more about the podcast. But one thing that I want to ask, you mentioned there a lot of bumps in the road. Obviously, having to keep, the podcast a secret for 2 years must have been big as well. But you just come across, you can see just now, a very positive person. You're always smiling. Everything for your entrance music, the way you wrestle. The album, your first album with Junior was called Beautiful Life. You've now got a love letter to wrestling. How do you keep that positive mindset when you face these bumps in the roads? What's the thing that makes you go, well, might as well just keep smiling and keep prodding on?
Do you know what I mean? I like to think I'm an optimistic person. I'm not sure if that's something that just runs in my family or if that's something I've learned over time. The truth is, there's always going to be bumps in the road, right? With everything, For me, it's been from my wrestling career, from music career, and with this podcast. And I think maybe once you accept that bumps in the road are going to happen, and there are going to be hard times and there's going to be lows, it makes you appreciate those highs so much more. And at least that's how I kind of try and live my life anyway. It's hard at times, but I guess you got to stay positive. And I do have a lot to be fortunate about, right now I'm living my dreams as a wrestler in the WWE. I get to play music on the side with two of my best mates. And then I get to talk about wrestling, which is the thing that I love most on top of that. So, it's easier for me to say to be positive because I've got a lot to be to be positive about. But yeah, you just got to enjoy life, haven't you? That's kind of the way I'm looking at it anyway.
I absolutely love that. Now, I'm aware that if I try and get any stories out here that have been told on the podcast, it's just not going to happen. We both know how this works, so I'm not even going to try. But I do want to ask, you interviewed a lot of big names, like I've only heard a few episodes myself, and I've already heard Kofi Kingston, Shawn Michaels, Charlotte Flair, and, your own family as well. So it's a nice little blend. But I want to ask, out of all the names you've interviewed, which was the most, either mind-blowing just for you chatting to them, or the most eye-opening as in someone that might have changed your mind about them?
Oh, do you know what? One of my favorite interviews from the whole thing is with Edge. And I think it's because this was after he'd come back from the first Rumble, from Rumble 2020. But it was before he'd kind of returned properly after that. It was right kind of, in the middle of it. And we chatted for about an hour straight. Obviously you only hear bits and bobs throughout the podcast, but he's such a humble guy, and considering he's such a huge star who has achieved so much in wrestling, but on top of that, he has had so many bumps in the road, like, we're talking about. He speaks so just on your level. There was no arrogance about him. He's the nicest guy, honestly. There was no, he's the higher up, but I'm the kind of rookie or anything about that. He just spoke to me about wrestling from his perspective. And it was awesome, and it was really nice to see, because I think that's what a lot of, at least younger up and coming wrestlers, even like myself, can learn from. It is not just necessarily what people are saying, but like how they're saying it and how they act. And Edge is someone who, I'd want leading a locker room anywhere in the world. So it was a real pleasure chatting to him, and especially because it's Edge, like it's Edge, one of the best of all time, so he speared Mick Foley through a flaming table. He doesn't get better than that, But on top of that, it's funny that you mentioned a minute ago, it's all these wrestling megastars, and then it's like my family. Yeah. I love how it's built, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle, my dad. And funnily enough, out of all the kind of top wrestlers in the world, and all these guys who were giving these incredible stories and telling me this incredible knowledge on wrestling, it was really nice for me, even though, I'm really close with my family and obviously my girlfriend and my friends, but it was really nice for me to have kind of direct conversations with like my friends from high school about how they felt when I was pursuing this crazy dream of pro wrestling, and they could give me their honest opinions on it, and speaking to my girlfriend about what it was like the first time she saw me wrestle, because the first time she saw me wrestle, I did a moonsault off of like a 16-foot balcony, and it was the first day that she met my mum as well. So it was a bit overwhelming for her. But it was really nice speaking to, as I said, like my family and my girlfriend and my friends, because they could give a completely different perspective on it. They're the ones that don't necessarily fully understand the crazy world of wrestling. So they gave even a fresher perspective on it than anyone could have in wrestling, whether they're a legend or a rookie or whatever.
Yeah, I absolutely love that balance, because it just gives a completely different perspective. One name that comes up quite a bit in even the first few episodes is Tegan Nox, a fellow Welsh wrestler. We mentioned setbacks. Boy, she's had a lot of them, but always seems to have that positive mindset. I know you speak very highly of her on the podcast. I just want to ask you what your thoughts are, both as her as a person and as a wrestler.
Tegan's the best. I mean, as a person, she's one of my best friends when we were coming up in the indies. And obviously we live on the other side of the world from each other now, so we don't get to hang out as much. But Tegan's the best. She's someone who was a real integral part to our little group of wrestlers growing up, the Attack group. We always talk about kind of like the five of us being me, Pete, Eddie Dennis, Wild Boar, and Flash. But she's like the sixth. She came in a bit later. She started after us. She's a bit younger, but she was the sixth member, really, because she was. I remember we'd spend every weekend together traveling up and down the country. I owe her so many miles of driving, because I didn't pass my test until like years later. She drove me up and down the country every weekend, so I am in debt to her for that. But yeah, she's just a great person, and I think she's a great person to have around. She's just a morale booster. But in the ring, I can't wait till the WWE universe can fully see all of her potential, because don't get me wrong, they've seen her in the ring. They know she's a great wrestler, but she hasn't been able to really hit her stride yet because of all these setbacks, because of her injuries. And I know that when she does come back and when she really goes in her stride, I mean, I like to boast to people about being, one half of the first Welsh champions in WWE. I think she's going to beat me to be the first Welsh singles champion, because there's no doubt she's going to win that NXT Women's Championship. I just hope that it can be in the Millennium Stadium in Wales.
Yeah.
That's where I want it to happen. I feel like after all the kind of bumps in the road that she's had over the last few years, she deserves a moment like winning the championship in the Millennium Stadium in Wales. That's what I hope she gets anyway. But yeah, she's outstanding, and I really can't wait for the world to see that.
Definitely. And I don't want to make you any busier than you already are, but I'm going to ask this next question anyway. I recently had the pleasure of speaking to Triple H and Shawn Michaels, and one thing that I asked about a man you're very familiar with, Pete Dunne, making the kind of transition, if you want to call it that, because he's still wrestling as well, but into backstage production. And I've been told that, a lot of wrestlers have been doing it in terms of Johnny Gargano, Walter. Is that something you've considered? And if not, is it something, have you worked under any wrestler in particular that's really impressed you with their production?
Oh, I'd absolutely love to go into a backstage role with WWE. I think when a lot of the wrestlers who end up making it on like the NXT UK roster, we've all had different journeys to get there, but a few of us have actually had experience in running our own shows. Me and Pete Dunne ran Attack Pro Wrestling. I'm trying to think who else. Trent Seven ran Fight Club Pro for years. Obviously, you've got loads of different wrestlers who've actually had a hand in booking and writing promos. And I would love to do that within the WWE. On top of that, I'm a big fan of video editing myself. That's my kind of side passion after my side passion, let's say, and I've started kind of trying to get my foot in the door a little bit. Like, I filmed and edited the Subculture entrance video, for example, because, there's a saying of, if you want something done right, do it yourself. And no one will ever be more passionate about, at least this is in the music scene, no one's going to be more passionate about your band than you. And no one's going to be as passionate about Subculture than me, Danny Luna, and Flash Morgan Webster. So we try and produce our own content. We try and produce, as I said, our own entrance video and stuff like that. If I could do that on a larger scale, I'd absolutely love to do. I'd love to be on the video editing team at NXT UK, because first of all, the guys there absolutely smash it. So I'd have to up my game. But I've had a handful of wrestlers come up to me and say, "Hey, can you edit my entrance video?" ever since they've seen the Subculture one. So I'm like, "Hey, I'll do it. Speak to the higher up, speak to Vince, and I'll get that job." Speak to Triple H. Let me in the editing team.
I'll see if I can fit it in between my wrestling, my podcasting, and my shows that I do as a band.
Yeah. Hey, if you want something done, ask a busy man, right? I'll be the busy man.
That's very true. Before we move into the last couple of questions, I feel like you're going to have a couple of names that you might mention here anyway. I'm going to see if I can get a not obvious one out of you. One of the things I love about NXT UK now, since the past year, when everything's just been completely overhauled, as we see people like Pretty Deadly that are coming through, didn't have a win before COVID happened, then ended up champions. Who in the locker room is the person that's impressing Mark Andrews? Who are you seeing that you're going, man, they're putting in some amount of work? It might not be showing on TV just yet, but they're going to be big.
Okay, I'm going to go for a bit of a... Well, there's so many, to be honest, the more I'm thinking about it. So, first of all, the obvious one, Danny Luna. Yeah. Right, I might be a bit biased, but Danny Luna is right there. Honestly, when she gets a real opportunity to show everybody, what she's made of, yeah, she's gonna blow up. And honestly, I keep saying to her, I was like, "Oh, when you get that WrestleMania payday, just remember who you started with."
I'll edit your videos.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll take that 5% cut for your entrance video. No, I'm kidding. But on top of that, I'm gonna name 3 guys who aren't even full-time roster members at NXT UK, and that's Danny Jones, Andy Wilde, and Josh Terry. Because the 3 of them, honestly. Oh, Josh Morrell, sorry, I believe on the Indies, Josh Terry. But those 3, I mean, they are absolutely smashing it. I mean, I'm a bit biased with Danny Jones because, I've known him for years and he's one of my friends, but he's an outstanding talent. He spent time out in Japan and he really brings that style over to the UK. One of few guys who, in my opinion, comes over and kind of does it properly. Then you got Andy Wilde, who is a real hidden gem in the scene. He's a veteran of the scene. I first met him 15 years ago at a Hammerlock camp up in Kent. We were both, kids, and he's honestly one of the best big men in the country. And then you've got Josh Morrell, who I have no idea why he is not on the top of the card at your Progresses, at your ICWs, at your Rev Pros, at all of the independents in the UK. This guy is so athletically gifted, and I am desperate to get in the ring with him on a one-on-one or a tag setting. He's got so much potential. And again, if those three can keep smashing it, I think I guess that they'd be the future of NXT UK. Because right now, as I said, they're not even full-time roster members. And I think that all three of them are just, they've got waves that they're about to make.
I love that you've given me three people who aren't even full-time roster members.
Yeah,
that is
sorry.
Absolutely incredible. So I've asked you a variation of this last year. I think I've got a better version I want to ask you. They don't need to play instruments, but if Mark Andrews can make the perfect band out of WWE superstars, who are you picking?
Oh, okay. I'm pretty sure Mark and Joe Coffey were in a band when they were younger. So maybe I'll throw one of those in there. And then who can sing? Danny Jones can sing. Tyler Bate can sing incredibly well as well, because he can do everything, can't he? I think, though, I would need a charismatic front man. And I think that goes to Trent Seven. I think, it wouldn't even matter if he was singing out of tune. He would smash it. So Trent Seven's up front singing. Flash did used to play drums. So maybe I'll whack Flash Morgan Webster on drums. And then, okay, there's got to be, is this out of NXT UK or is this everyone?
You can pick anyone.
Because Boogs, I'm getting Rick Boogs in there on lead guitar. I love that man. He's the best thing on TV at the moment. He's the man. So yeah, he can be lead guitar, and I'll just stick with backing vocals and rhythm guitar, or bass. I'll do whatever.
I love that. It seems like we've got like the Beach Boys on stage because there's about 20 members, but I'm sure it would sound incredible anyway.
Yeah.
From absolutely amazing. From Cassidy, thank you, Andrews. I really appreciate you taking the time, man. Can't wait to listen to more of the podcast.
Yeah, cheers, Cassidy. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Cheers.